Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Senate Utilities Committee. We are going to get started now that we have a quorum. We talked about House Bill 2329 yesterday and wanted to try to have discussion and final action on it today, if possible. So I want to just remind everyone about House Bill 2329 and bring our reviser, Nick Myers, back up to the podium to give us, or you can do it from right back there, Nick, if you'd like, to give us a quick review of the bill so it's fresh in everyone's mind. Nick?
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Again, committee, House Bill 2329 is the bill that relates to the pipeline safety rules and regulations that are overseen by the Kansas Corporation Commission. And what the bill would do, under current law, there's basically four entities that fall under the KCC's rules and regulatory authority for pipeline safety, and the bill would add a fifth entity, the operators of gathering lines, as it's defined under the federal regulation. And then the bill would also remove the current statutory provision that excludes those pipelines that provide service directly to the ultimate consumer if the use is for farming or oil and gas production. And I believe we heard the KCC say they were unaware of any lines that existed in the state that met that criteria at this time. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Nick. Committee, any questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to make sure I got this clear. There's four areas now. We'd be adding a fifth. Is there, and this has to do, this is going to mirror what the federal's doing. I heard the federal part of that. Okay, is there anything else out there besides that in that would cover? I just want to make sure we're being consistent with what we're trying to do there.
Yes, I believe what we heard yesterday, especially from the conferee from the KCC, is that this fifth entity that is being added is currently subject to pipeline safety rules and regulations under the PHMSA, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration at the federal level. So these operators of gas gathering lines are already subject to pipeline safety rules and regulations. This would just put those entities under the jurisdiction of the KCC for pipeline safety inspections and operations.
Thank you, Senator Fagg. Any other questions? And just to be clear, this is what they call gathering lines, essentially. So it's not from the wellhead. It's the wellhead to the first junction is not counted, but that first junction and then on to the transport lines is what I think we're talking about covering. Any other discussion, committee? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion. What is the will of the committee on this bill? Senator Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we pass out House Bill 2329 favorable for passage, and because of a non-controversial nature, it be placed on the consent calendar.
You've heard the motion from Senator Peterson. Do I have a second? Second by Senator Francisco. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. And it is going to go to the consent calendar. Thank you, committee. This is our first bill out of committee this year. So I appreciate the hard work on that very much. With that work behind us, considering the situation in Ukraine and Russia, we thought it might be prudent to bring Ed Cross back in. He gave us a brief earlier in the session and about the oil situation in Kansas, but I thought it might be good to hear from Ed about his thoughts on what he's seeing there in Russia and Ukraine. So Ed, we'll welcome you to the committee, give a few comments, and then we'll open up to questions. I might say your name for the folks online too, Ed.
All right. My name is Edward Cross, and I'm the president of the Kansas Independent Oil and Gas Association. And it's my pleasure to be here today, and I appreciate the opportunity. You know, the tragedies, what's happening over in the Ukraine, but it is affecting energy policy here in the United States, because we all feel the effects of rising energy prices, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine only adds to our current concerns and heightens the importance of the role of U.S. energy policy. I could talk, I'll talk a little bit about gasoline prices and things like that in a minute, but I just sitting right there, I just looked, the posted price for Kansas crude oil today is $100.75. So, I mean, and that's certainly a war premium on that. I don't think anybody's making budgets based on $100 oil, but so it has an effect. But the European countries are starting to realize their fears about energy access and affordability with the breakout of that conflict in the Ukraine. Broadly similar to the Green New Deal type of policies, the European Union has been cutting off their fossil fuel production and usage without a viable alternative to meet that baseline demand. And with their domestic sources waning, Russia stepped in to meet that demand with their Nord Stream natural gas pipeline. Now that Russian supply is threatened, renewable sources are not able to meet the demand, and energy prices continue to increase sharply across the continent. And the lesson learned from Europe is that renewable energy sources are not ready to meet national energy demand. And over-reliance on renewable energy and Russian gas has been a recipe for disaster for the EU. President Biden should heed this warning and about what his energy agenda could bring here if he keeps his attack on American oil and gas. Americans had a fairly stable energy prices in the 2017 through 2019 time period. Part of that is due to the tremendous increase in energy production in the United States, both oil and natural gas. In 2018, the U.S. produced 95% of its domestic energy requirements, at the largest share since 1967. Gasoline prices, which most Americans look at the most, averaged $2.60 a gallon in 2019, which was 4% lower than 2018. So here's a key point in all of this is when a country becomes a leading producer of oil and natural gas, like the United States did, and has reduced carbon dioxide emissions by 70% in 10 years, it's clearly that we're doing many things right in that. But lately we've seen some policies aimed at restricting American production, and that has resulted in energy prices escalating. First, it was, the pipeline bringing oil from Canada to the U.S. was quickly canceled, and then new leasing for energy development on federal lands was stopped, and you add to that a batch of proposed punitive and unnecessary and burdensome regulations on oil and gas operations, and these actions have severely hampered American oil and gas companies' ability to adequately supply the market and have put American energy independence at risk. Now, these are short-sighted energy policies that result in higher energy costs that disproportionately harm low-income groups. Just recently, I think we had our two senators and a Representative Cole from Oklahoma come out with, wanting to ban Russian exports of oil. In the United States, we bring in 700,000 barrels a day of Russian oil, even though we have plenty of a supply right here. As a matter of fact, in California, they get a lot of their oil from OPEC, ships that come in because they don't allow pipelines to go to California to take the oil there. These we shouldn't be importing Russian oil. That's a good thing that we should be doing, is to ban that. When policy signals prevent energy leadership here at home, there's going to be consequences. And U.S. policies that restrict domestic production force our country to seek relief from foreign suppliers of oil, and that undermines our energy independence. And the problem is that when certain foreign governments control your energy, they have the power to use it for their own purposes and not yours. So America should not be in the position of asking for foreign energy supplies, especially when we have abundant resources produced to standards that are among the highest in the world right here at home. So instead, we should be leading as the world's energy producer. Energy should be a bipartisan priority. And at Cuyahoga, that's what we advocate, that spirit every day. And there's nothing more essential to economic growth than reliable, affordable, and abundant energy. And to lose that advantage is not to anybody's best interest. Recently, John Kerry, the President Biden's special presidential envoy for climate, said he was concerned that the war in Ukraine will distract attention away from the climate crisis. These type of unserious statements coming from Kerry and other members of the Biden administration is creating a geopolitical power vacuum. We may not be serious, but our enemies are ruthlessly so. They raise a toast to our self-inflicted demise. And we are left with a simple choice in the U.S. Get serious about our energy policy and preserve our place as a geopolitical order, or be forced to stop play acting as a superpower. And it's time for President Biden and policymakers to recognize the strategic importance of American energy production by reversing many of those decisions. You know, senseless pandering to the green left has helped foster the very conditions that have given Vladimir Putin confidence that his war in Ukraine will be met with little resistance from the U.S. So as a country, do we really want to stay in the path of restricting production, denying permits, closing off access, and returning to the days of dependence on foreign sources? And we must consider, everybody that impacts. President Biden, while claiming to fighting to keep energy prices down, has made the wrong move at every turn. Nothing less than a total reversal of his approach is necessary. And so this is what President Biden needs to send a message to the world to stop the decline of American energy security. Certain times require reevaluation of priorities and reorganization of values, and the global crisis that Putin has set in motion is such a moment. Putin tends to lash out when energy prices are high. That's how he finances much of that. So lowering energy costs is what we need to do, and that's not easy, and it will take time. But the only effective means of lowering the price of energy is increasing supply. President Biden could announce his intent to reverse his decisions to shut down domestic oil and gas and coal industries, and that would send a positive signal to the market that would put downward pressure on energy prices. Now, if you look back at President Bush 43, I call that, he lifted the moratorium on the east and west outer continental shelf back in July of 2008. And that was a time when the price of gasoline was nearly $4 a gallon. The result was a $16 drop in crude oil and a 12% drop in gasoline prices in 45 days. So what that did was there's a clear link between anticipated supply and downward pressure on prices. So President Biden and all policymakers should embrace oil and gas exploration. If the U.S. is energy independent, then we don't beg people in the Middle East or Russia to help us, and Putin wouldn't have the financial reserves to subsidize an invasion. America was energy independent just a few years ago, and President Biden and all policymakers should do everything they can to make us energy independent again. All policymakers should prioritize advancing American energy leadership with policies that encourage development of responsibly produced energy here at home. And these policies should recognize the volatile world we live in and the long-term impacts of returning to the days of foreign energy dependency. So, Mr. Chairman, I know I probably didn't cover everything there, but I wasn't for sure what all we need to, but I'd be glad to just informal discussion or questions.
Thank you, Ed. Committee, do you have any questions? Senator Hawk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Ed. In terms of looking at the Russian pipeline, and I think you mentioned LNG when you did your first report to us earlier in the year. Is that a potential solution for the European Union in this immediate crisis? And would some of that export come from the U.S.? And what kind of help could that be?
Good question, Senator. Indeed, we were never even before in favor of the Nord Stream, the natural gas pipeline coming from Russia to Europe, because that did give Russia leverage on Europe even before an invasion. And they knew that. And we have the natural gas, and LNG is certainly a way that the United States can help EU and all the European nations with their energy needs there, and that's something that needs to be looked at, is exports of LNG. Natural gas prices, they were like last month, I think they were $6 or something. Here, I'm talking about what the producer itself gets. Today, it's like $4. So that's it dropped quite a bit, but $4 is still a good price for March. Usually, last year it was $1.50 or something. So we still have that. So if we can get more export of that, that's going to help producers as well as help those that need the energy.
So are there other countries that produce a lot of LNG?
There are.
Us?
There are other places that produce natural gas that can be made into LNG, and I'm trying to think right now. I don't have a list of that in front of me, but the United States is one of the largest producers of natural gas, if not the largest.
I think our exports have gone up a lot
in the last 2, 3, 4 years, have they not?
Absolutely, both crude oil and natural gas, until recent policies are trying to restrict some of that, but.
Good, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Peterson?
Thank you, Ed. I don't know if it's really in your wheelhouse, but we had this nice warm weather, so I was thinking the refineries maybe getting ready to switch over to summer blend. How much of an effect on gas prices does that really have? Do you know?
Sometimes that does affect the refinery turnover. And yes, again, I'm not an expert on refineries, and so I don't want to pretend like I am. But I know that they do change over to different blends, or even change, if there's a high demand for diesel, for example. They do, the refineries, like anything else, it's supply and demand. If they're producing diesel, they're doing so by producing less gasoline, which may put prices up on gasoline. But turnaround, they have to do what they call turnaround, where they basically clean all that out so they can produce other products. And so some of that can affect gasoline prices. And, gasoline prices, I talked to media about many of that yesterday and today. And that's here in Kansas and anywhere in the United States, we're price takers on that. The gasoline and crude oil is supply and demand driven, and crude oil is a global commodity, so that anything happens in the world, whether it's in Russia or somewhere else, it affects crude oil prices that we get right here. I had one media person when we were talking about all of the regulations and things that they were doing to the producers that could add a lot of cost to the production and could hurt many small producers. Their question was, well, then why don't you just tell the refiner or the buyer of the crude oil that because you have all of these additional costs that you're going to have to sell it to them at a higher price? But that's not the way the market works here. It's a supply and demand market. They wouldn't buy that if you tell them we're price takers. Here's the price of oil and natural gas today, and that's what we do. And whenever the supply is down and demand's high, the price goes up for crude oil, and then that affects the gasoline prices. And that's really where the gasoline prices are right now too. Is because of a dip in supply and high demand.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Cross, for being here. So you've focused on a need to increase the supply. How helpful could it be to, at the same time, try to address demand by having appropriate standards for insulation of homes, building codes? Because, we know that our cities are hopefully going to expand and population may increase. So how do we fit within a supply we can manage?
And very good point. I'm glad you brought that up, Senator. We have always, for decades, so all the decades that I've been in the industry, and probably long before I have always been in favor of conservation methods that actually reduce demand. Because that is something that we all need to do as far as reducing demand by all of the conservation measures that you make right there. And those are important part to deal with the demand side of the equation. As far as the Energy Information Administration, the EIA, I call them. They are projecting energy demand to continue to increase all the way out to 2050 worldwide, and even here in the United States. So it's not like demand's going to actually go down, but we just need to be much more efficient in the way that we use energy. And by doing so, we also reduce emissions. That's how we've reduced emissions so much in the United States over the last several years, as many of those conservation measures. All right, thanks.
Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ed, I feel like we're back where we were 12, 15 years ago. And, I remember when oil went to $154 a barrel or $150 a barrel. And, 15, 20 years ago, same problem. Putin, them guys were cutting off the Middle East with their natural gas. They have to use the oil to produce heat over in Europe and et cetera, and they drive the price up. They do it when we're at a low production point because we had cheap oil, And, you know, it's like we're in a circle of just keep doing the same thing over and over. Economy starts rebounding, next thing you know, there goes the price. They start jacking it up. I mean, is the government opening up the strategic reserves or doing anything to help level the price? I mean, because what's going to happen, research and development, we're going to start drilling again. In 5 years, price will go down and we'll start this cycle all over again.
So, good question. I know you understand these issues very well, Senator. But the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, I think President Biden took 50 million barrels out of that before. But the United States uses about 20 million barrels a day. And so you take 50 million barrels out, that's 2.5 days. But so it's there. It's really there for an emergency use. So in case we need it for. That they tapped into it, in February of 2021 when we had the winter things. They tapped into it when we had the Katrina hurricane, as well as some of the other hurricanes emergencies that we have. So it's there for those kinds of purposes. But you're all right. It's cyclical. I don't know. Maybe I think you were here when I said the oil price today for Kansas is $100.75 a barrel. Now it's more than that. When you hear the market, they'll talk about Brent crude oil price, which is higher than what we get. But there's no operator I know that is planning a budget based on $100 oil. Again, if I go back to the EIA, they think the average for Kansas price for 2022 will be 65. It is a volatile market, and Putin, whenever that's when he likes to as I said, lash out is when oil prices are high, because that's how he finances. If we can put those sanctions on and say we can't take any Russian oil. Russian exports, they export about 60% to Europe and about 30% to China. China's not going to honor any of those sanctions. As a matter of fact, we'll probably take more Russian oil, if there was left there. So it's a dynamic issue. I don't want to pretend like I have all the answers to that, but I don't. But I do know that here in the United States, that we have the ability to, with the right policies, could probably increase our production here by almost another 20% across the case. Now, I don't mean tomorrow. I mean, if you did all these things and then tomorrow, it takes time to get those. But the United States could I think the Alaskan pipeline's only about 25% full, but we're importing oil from Russia and OPEC and stuff, and we need to fill that pipeline up with Alaskan oil.
I know it's a pretty big shock I went by Quick Trip this morning and it was $3.69.
Yeah.
And I mean, in a week or so, we went basically up about 69 cents. And, we've been debating power rates and all that.
Yeah.
And, we're seeing oils probably went up, 30% or so in just the last 2 or 3 weeks. What's that going to do to the average person's pocketbook, to consumers?
And that's a big thing. There is certainly a war premium going on right now in both crude oil and gasoline prices. And that's, like I say, that's just what happens when there's supply and demand, and the supply is being threatened by that. But it is a free market, and unfortunately, whenever you have those kinds of threats, that's what I said. Even just the talk right now of a president and leaders in the United States that we're going to, go back and get some more oil here in the United States, whether it be off the federal lands or relaxing some of these regulations. Just the talk of that would send signals to the market that supply is going to increase. And like when President Bush did that in 2008, it automatically reduced 12% reduction in gasoline prices, even though there hadn't been anything done yet to drill them. It's just the signal that it's going to happen does that.
I just want to make one last comment. Just a lot of people criticize the last president, but one of the things I think he did great was take a look at the strategic reserve where it was when he got it. He got us low gas prices, and he put a lot of oil in that baby.
He sure did. He filled that strategic reserve when oil prices were during the COVID, when oil prices were down and we were getting $12 a barrel or something. He used that opportunity to fill that strategic reserve. Yes, it's a very good point.
Committee, any other? I think I did, Tuesday, I think I heard the president say that he was pulling 60 million barrels out, but maybe it's something like that. And I saw Brent crude spiked at 2 o'clock this morning at 120. And so it's definitely, I also heard, and you may or may not confirm this, that, at these prices, there are some producers that are hesitant to jump in and start producing. Is that what you're hearing?
There are some. I mean, like I say, nobody's counting on $100 oil for a long time. But so what they worry about is some of the things that might be coming down the pike, particularly in types of regulations like federal regulations on methane or lesser prairie chicken, or things that would cost a lot of money to implement. And so that worries them, because if you do those things, then you have a lot more cost on that, and you don't know, you don't think the oil's going to be $100 a barrel, but we don't know what it's going to be. If it, even if EIA was right, and they come out with a different estimate every month. So I say they say it's 65 for the year, but that was as of February 8th. Their next one is March 8th, so it'll be something different. But so the producers, it's a risk, that they have to look at, and so that does dampen some of that.
You don't have any kind of projections? Do you have any kind of projections on, say, this war is protracted, where it could go back up to 150 barrel? I mean, is that out of the realm of? The projections I get is the ones that I read, which all of us can read on that. So, the last one I saw yesterday could be 140 to 150, which are talking Brent price. So, and so if we were probably $15 or $20 less than that here. But hopefully it doesn't do that. No one wants a war. We don't want a war to keep oil prices up. That's not what anybody wants. But And are Kansas oil producers, I know we don't have as many federal lands like some of the other states out west. Are we as restricted in production as some of those? Or I know refinery space is one restriction that we have. You can't refine everything you produce if you got a flood of that stuff coming onto the market. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, the first one is we do not have a lot of oil and gas production on federal lands in Kansas. There's not a lot of federal lands, and certainly not with oil and gas production on that. So even though those don't necessarily affect us, it does affect the country as a whole as far as production, because there is a lot of production on federal lands throughout the United States. As far as refineries, again, I'm not an expert on all of that, but roughly Kansas has about 300,000 barrels a day of refining capacity. And, we used to produce about 100,000 barrels a day. Now we're about 80,000. So, we have to bring a couple 100,000 or more barrels a day into Kansas just to get that refining capacity. So there is room there, and so, but, refinery capacity is an issue. It has been in the past whenever they get, that near peak capacity, and that affects gasoline prices as well.
I'm guessing if the refineries aren't near capacity, do they do maintenance mode? Do they shut part of the refinery down so they're not operating?
The refineries, and again, I'm not a refinery expert, but I can just tell you they're not trying, they don't have like a huge profit margin all the time on all of that. So if they're not using all their refining capacity, then they may not be making as much money as they think they could. So they like to keep it, where they are. Now, some refineries, they got the equipment made for heavy crude oil, for example. And what we produce here in Kansas is light sweet crude oil. So heavy crude oil is, what I would say is they can make less gallons of gasoline out of heavy crude oil than they can light sweet crude oil. So they pay less for heavy crude oil. But if they put all the expenses in developing capital to refine heavy crude oil, and they don't have that, like coming from Canada or somewhere, but they can buy light sweet crude oil, sometimes they only want to give you the price of the heavy crude oil because that's what their equipment's made for. So that affects prices for crude oil.
Any other questions, committee? Well, thank you, Ed. Seeing none, we appreciate your report and your update. And committee, no meeting tomorrow. We will have meetings next week, of course. And so with that, we are adjourned.